And we are back, The Fairness Doctrine. Yours truly, Chuck Morse, Dr. Patrick O'Heffernan. Love those new bumpers, that being Muddy Waters. Patrick will be joined shortly by Dr. Judith Reisman, Sexual Sabotage. And let's see if we're on board here. Judith Reisman, thanks for joining us this afternoon. Oh, we have to get Patrick first. Anyway, Patrick and I yesterday talked about this website, Maria Talks, and everyone's up on board. We are back. Chuck Morse, Dr. Patrick O'Heffernan. We were joined by Dr. Judith Reisman. The book is Sexual Sabotage. Judith, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you so much. I've been reading all about this girl. Her name is Maria.
You're talking, Maria Talks. Yeah, we talked about it yesterday, Judith.
Yeah, and she's done all this work for an 18-year-old girl. All this accurate work. I'm so impressed about her and her Aunt Lucy.
Let me just, Patrick, for the sake of clarification, yesterday we talked about this, and you said that this group had gotten a $100,000 grant from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts as a one-time deal, but in fact, this is one thing I did look into. It's an annual $100,000, and one of my sources on that is none other than the Daily Costs, which of course did a laudatory article on it, but yet referred to the annual $100,000 that they get. And that the controversy is that Governor Patrick has been asked by several organizations, and not just Mass Citizens for Life, but others, to stop funding this thing. And he has stated, I will continue funding it. I think it's a great idea. Now, putting aside, Patrick, and you and I can talk about this separately, which is exactly why do you need $100,000 to run a website? I mean, we have a website. We talked about a website that has all the bells and whistles that might cost maybe $2,000 or $3,000 at most. But I want to know who's getting fat off that $100,000 and who's getting the money and why. And that's more of a political question.
Well, first of all, I stand corrected. I thought it was only a one-time grant.
Yeah.
Secondly, my information on that was that the initial $100,000 wasn't actually used for the website. It was used to conduct the surveys that led to the website. And thirdly, we can put up a website for a couple of grand, but I happen to know that for a quality website with the number of pages this one has and et cetera, that I did one similar to this for Link TV, and we spent $60,000 on constructing it and getting it up and running, and probably an ongoing $10,000 a month to keep it going. So you and I know how to do things really cheap.
Well, that's a heck of somebody's making a pretty penny off of that.
No.
It has to be since this is an accurate website. Then the person who's making all this money must be Maria and her Aunt Lucia, because it's Maria's talking, isn't it? I mean,
yes.
That's what it says. I see all the pictures of Maria. She's smiling. Everybody's happy. I'm so pleased for her. And her dear aunt. Never would I say a thing like that about the sexology profession that's been leading us for the past 40 and 50 years and causing the trauma it's already caused for our kids and giving them the false information that it's giving them. But the issue here becomes honesty, isn't it? Accuracy, isn't it? Well, if we're talking to these teenagers and telling them how to engage in various sodomies,
stuff that they probably never even heard of before looking at this site.
Pardon?
Some of the things that are described in this site that's supposed to be for young girls are things that I doubt if my daughter has ever heard of these things. I didn't even want to talk about it when I went home because I'm afraid she's going to now look at this thing. I talked about it with my wife in private.
Well, the fact is, I just did a quick content analysis here. I didn't check into how often Maria is called Maria because that's a lie. Okay, so we start off with a lie. There is no Maria. Maria is an invention of the bureaucrats who created this thing. And
I don't think they pretend that there is. I mean, I think it's a fictional character.
That isn't the point. That isn't the point. They're presenting themselves as completely accurate. These are teenagers. These are kids. They're not even teenagers half the time.
Right.
They're young kids. And when they have a boy allegedly on there named Thomas saying, I think Maria is pretty cool, I want to ask her out, and then they tell these kids how to engage in various kinds of sodomies without in any way, shape, or form really telling them the truth about the trauma that results from this. Now you're talking about stepping into something else. You've got pictures there that glamorize and smile through everything, including HIV. That's part of their accurate statement. These kids who are looking at this material, and they can be 10-year-olds and 11-year-olds and so forth, they have been brought up to believe images. They've been brought up to believe what they're seeing here. And that is what they have presented. And Maria does not exist. And I don't say this loosely. I say it because Maria is a construction, a propagandistic construction to bring these youngsters into the truth world, to bring them into the belief system. There is no Maria. There are a bunch of adults over there. Who those people are, I would like to know, who really constructed it. I want to know their backgrounds. I want to know their sexual proclivities. Those are the facts that the kids need to know if they're really going to know the truth.
Judith, I have known over the years, several people that might be similar to this Maria, except a lot of them are now dead. But I am deeply... Yeah. The thing that bothers me also about this, putting aside the morality of it or the lack of morality, is that I'm bothered by it as a feminist. And when I say that, what I mean is that... the way they describe abortion, and again, I mean, I do support legal abortion, is that they don't tell young women the whole truth about abortion. What they say is, and I don't have the language in front of me here, but I looked at it last night, they go, abortion is easier than you think. And yes, there might be, and they say there might be very rare complications, but it's very, they make it seem very easy and normal. Now, a couple of years ago, I interviewed an author who actually wrote a book anonymously because she was a clinical psychiatrist working at an Ivy League university as a counselor.
That was Miriam.
That's
right.
okay. So you know about this.
Yeah.
And she talked about the fact that she counseled young women who were thinking of having abortions, and by law, she was not allowed to discuss anything other than here's where you go and here's what you do. But yet she would have she wrote many case studies of young women who would come to her after the abortion, and the psychological, the physical damage. She tells harrowing stories of a woman seeing her dead baby in the toilet a couple of weeks after her abortion when it came out. And some of the psychological damage this has done, some of the physical damage, some of the, and all the rest. And these are horror stories of young women becoming depressed, suicidal, probably committing suicide. We'll never know the whole bit because it's never been investigated. It's been kind of hushed up. But the fact is that this website, if they want to support abortion, that's their business, but they won't tell women the truth about abortion in all of its permutations. This is something that is not allowed legally. It's not politically correct besides. And that bothers me as a feminist. It bothers me as a father of a daughter that women aren't being told the truth. If you want to be pro-abortion, fine. Tell women the truth. When you go to the hospital to have surgery, if you have diphtheria or malaria, the doctors tell you everything you need to know about the after effects of it. This is the only thing that happens in a hospital where people are not told the truth about what happens afterwards or what could happen.
Yeah, but Chuck, let's begin at the beginning here, and that is that this Maria thing is giving falsehoods across the board. You mentioned the reactions of these women. Well, I've interviewed more young women who have had abortions and not forget the abortions, but young women who have had multiple partners because they thought that is what they should be doing.
And hooking up.
Suicidal ideation and actual suicides are absolutely fallout problems that are associated with this. So is depression. And so I look on this website to see how accurate this so-called information to these youngsters is, and what I find is suicide has 2 mentions only, and only in relation to violence, to somebody being raped,
Right.
that sort of thing. Well, it turns out that young women have souls, they have hearts, they have hopes, they have dreams, and when they hook up, quote unquote, with some guy, when they have sex with some guy, and they have a physiological response to that, and we know it's a bonding response.
Yeah,
We
friends
certainly
with
know
benefits, they call it.
Yeah, well, there are no benefits really,
Right, of
and the
course
fact is that these youngsters are suffering terribly, and depression is common. And the only mentions of depression in this document, which is supposed to be accurate, would be 3 mentions in that. In one is about violence if you're raped. The other one is about you can get depressed if you get these implants, And then there could be fallout with the progesterone shots. There could be a little bit of depression there. Well, the fact is that this Maria business, in my view, because I have studied sex education and sexology for the past 35 years, 40 years, is just the same old, except that now we are promoting oral sodomy and anal sodomy across the board, and nobody is talking about the relationship of anal sodomy to AIDS and to HIV, quote unquote. You got 28 citations there to anal sodomy, for crying out loud.
Oh, I know, and no one's talking about
Give me a break.
And they're not talking about studies that have been done that connect abortion to breast cancer either. All right, we're going to take a brief break. We'll be right back.
About any of the accuracy issues.
We'll be right back, Judith. Please stick to the time.
Okay.
You're listening to the Fairness Doctrine on the Cyberstation USA Radio Network. Patrick, it's all yours. I mean, Chuck, it's all yours. It's both of yours.
Rich, and Judith Reisman's our guest. Patrick, why don't you chime in?
Yeah, and looking at this, and also listening to the way and the very precise way in which Judith has gone through the site, I'm going to begin to change my opinion.
Okay.
Don't
want to take us on, eh?
No, I read through it from the point of view of, is this technically accurate information? But the context matters, and as I think Judith has accurately pointed out, there are emphasis and lack of emphasis that do matter here. And while I disagree with you, and the National Cancer Institute agrees with you on the connection of abortion to breast cancer, there is a connection of abortion to depression that's been documented, and there is, and it's not like any operation. It has its risks, and when you go in, like you said, Chuck, when you go in and have an operation for anything, one of the things you do is you sign a form that says things can go wrong.
But you also are informed of all aspects. And by the way, I didn't say that it causes cancer. I said that there have been several studies done in Europe mainly that link it, and that breast cancer has become an epidemic in this country and worldwide since the 1980s, and that's around the same time that abortion became legal and more common. And my question to researchers...
Well, wait a minute. You interrupted me. I wasn't done.
Oh, okay.
I wasn't done agreeing with you. Okay.
We love that. You keep on that agreeing. I love it, especially when you said I know.
Answer. Okay. I'm just noticing that the National Cancer Institute published a report in February that after a review of all the available data, that they said that miscarriage or abortion does not increase women's subsequent risk of developing breast cancer. That information may be updated and it may show something different. That's a side issue. What I want to get back to is that I think that the context here actually renders the information incorrect. That this kind of information does have to be delivered with a context. They're not delivering it with a context, and even though it may be technically correct, it's not really correct, and I think that it needs to be revamped. And I also, and offline, was talking to Judith, who pointed out that Big Pharma's fingerprints are all over this. That
don't doubt it.
It's designed to sell more of Big Pharma's products, and of course, that's not being revealed here. And for your information, Judith, the website is run by the AIDS Action Committee of Massachusetts. You want to know who it is, and that's who it is. Right. I'm going to see if I can find out who funds them. So I'm going to drop back and say that while the information, as as far as I can tell, seems to be accurate. It is not in context, and without that context, it's not accurate.
Okay, and Patrick, I looked into a little bit about who funds the AIDS Action Committee, and I didn't find a lot, but I did find that they did take a check from George Soros. Anyways, Judith?
Yeah, well, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, look, I started my research way back looking at cigarette consumption in the old days and the so-called scientific data on the link between cancer and tobacco consumption. And way in the old days, all of our research said, no, there's no connection at all. And when I tried to get data on advertising and the advertising of cigarette consumption, even our government agencies weren't even wouldn't even dare to look at those connections. So I'm very cynical about the kinds of research that come out of the government. I know how people work. I've been there. I did a major research for DOJ. So, this is not the person to talk to about that. But I look at the factual realities in terms of what I see all around me, and that is that when young girls engage in oral sodomy instead of with some guy that they met, 6 days ago or 2 hours ago, and when they're told that anal sodomy is perfectly all right as well, and when they're given all this kind of information, we're looking at crushing the hearts of millions and millions of young girls. And boys, too, by the way. Don't think that the boys engage in these activities, without severe harm to them. So we're not even talking about college kids. We're talking here about high school, junior high school. I'm talking to these kids all the time, and they are heartbroken, and they are depressed, and they will do anything to get a boyfriend, and they will put on any kind of clothing. They're shaping their bodies. They're worried about their weight. This is no way to deal with them, this kind of so-called factual information. There's nothing factual here. I'm looking at what they say, not just about abortion, but about all these sexual activities. You can't talk about these girls getting involved in these activities without telling the truth about the harm that it causes them emotionally and physically. Whether it's going to bring about abortion or not is not the whole story.
Right.
The way, right? Okay, so wake up and smell the coffee. We have been so desensitized and so dehumanized over the years, guys. All of this was illegal pre-Kinsey. We go back to my book, Sexual Sabotage. All of these activities were illegal pre-Kinsey. You didn't seduce girls. Seduction was against the law. It was a felony, for crying out loud. In California, much less the sodomies that we're talking about. And there were reasons that these things were illegal, and they were not invalid reasons. And the only time we see in this material, the only time we see mom and dad, first of all, there's no word for father. There's no word for husband. There's no word for grandmother. No word for grandfather. One time mother is mentioned. I did a check on the number of times that parents are mentioned. Well, 24 parental mentions, but most of those are insurance, parental insurance, for crying out loud. And when you talk about your parents, they're either cool, which means you can tell them what you want to do and they'll approve it, or you don't want to talk to them. Well, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's
when
terrible.
Mom and Dad were in charge of human sexuality education up until the sexologists got hold of it and Big Pharma, when Mom and Dad were in charge, yeah, I'm sorry, they maybe didn't tell the kids everything that they were supposed to tell them, but those kids were not having out-of-wedlock pregnancies. I have the data. We all had the data. The venereal disease was down at the bottom of the barrel, and they were significantly happier with nothing to compare in terms of depression and suicide and suicidal ideation. So the sexology profession, which is built on Kinsey, stepped in, took over for parents, said because parents don't tell the kids about all these things, we have to tell them. And now we have a broken-hearted population of youth who are then going to run this country. We're in trouble.
Judith, does this website actually say on it that if your parents aren't cool, don't tell them? Does it say that?
No. It says no. What it says is if your parents are cool, you
Right.
talk to them. And if you can talk to them, that's dandy if they're cool. But the implication,
Sure.
Pat, you understand understand, Chuck, what we're seeing. What is the subcontext? What is the sub-narrative here? The sub-narrative here is your parents, if they agree with all this stuff, and they'll tell you all this stuff, and they'll help you with the abortions and all that garbage, that if they do that, they are cool. That means you can talk to them. But if they're uptight parents, the kind of parents who say, hey, I don't want you going out with that guy. I don't want you doing this stuff. You're staying home. These are uncool parents. These are parents that you can't really, quote, talk to. So you go to Aunt Lucy.
Now, Judith,
who are the blazes is Aunt Lucy?
Yeah, who is Aunt Lucy, by the way?
Yeah, I mean, see, Aunt Lucy's another propaganda structure. Don't think this did not go through the appropriate advertising critique. Come on.
It has an ad agency feel to it across the board. I've worked for ad agencies, and it sounds like, some agency in Boston probably, that's who probably got the big money here, by the way. They constructed all of this.
Absolutely. And who are you going to trust? Well, everybody wants to have a cool Auntie Mame, a cool Aunt Lucy. And you can trust Aunt Lucy. Well, Aunt Lucy shows up, and then there's a picture of a doctor. Big smiling. Well, where's all those smiles all over this place? Come on. Most of our kids are in a state of real trauma. If they're engaged in any of this kind of stuff, and if they're not engaged in it, they're also in trauma because everybody else is doing it, they think, except them. So this is a boondoggle from beginning to end. It follows up on all the other kind of boondoggles the sexology profession has pushed on our kids. The data are clear. Our STDs are off the charts. Our rapes of children by children are off the charts. Teenagers are messing each other up. This is not a pretty story, and this is the accurate story that should be told on this website, and boy, it is not.
Patrick?
There's a lot of things to respond to there, and I'm going to, because we have limited amount of times and I can't respond to all of them, I'm going to focus down on the things that aren't being said, and the fact, and just repeat what I said, that there's not context here. That all of the conversations that Maria is having, and I do agree it has an ad agency feel to it, is very, very professionally done. It has, and I wouldn't be a bit surprised if there wasn't drug money involved in this. I'm currently looking up the $990 for the agency. I don't just because I want to find out who's funding it, like you say. That all of these statements that they have in here about, let's say, birth control, for instance, they show there's different kinds of birth control. That's fine. I think kids these days need to know about it. But what they don't talk about, and I didn't see that nowhere in here does it say that the best way to not get pregnant is to not have sex. Now, I understand that that's a tough sell to teenagers. But it's a sell that needs to be done, and that's something that Maria and her aunt should be telling people, that the best way is to not have
Patrick,
sex.
we have to go to a break. Judith, can you stay with us for a while?
Oh, sure. Patrick is going around agreeing with me, for heaven's sake.
We might as well, yeah. This is something else.
I often agree with you.
I don't mean 100%.
Okay, we're going to go to a break. You're listening to the Fairness Doctrine, Left, Right, and Uncensored. Hello, America. You're listening to the Fairness Doctrine, Left, Right, and Uncensored.
Support for that at this point. At this point. Maybe someday they'll prove
We're back on the air.
We are back on the air. Chuck Morse, Dr. Patrick O'Heffernan, Judith Reisman is the author of Sexual Sabotage. Judith, one of the things that Patrick and I discussed yesterday with regard to the business of this Ask Maria website is that Patrick, you said that you thought that it was a good thing that the site has no value statement, so it doesn't take any positions with regard to any values. It's all just plain old statistics and facts. And I really see the opposite issue here. I think
I'm changing my mind on that.
Okay, but yeah, what you expressed, Patrick, is in fact the ethos of this site, and is the ethos of the entire sexual structure around that Judith talks about, going back to Kinsey, that to hold values as part of or judgment with regard to sex is a bad thing, that you need to remove that. I mean, I trace it back to Freud, who talked about polymorphous perversity as being the ultimate human good. What polymorphous perversity is a society in which people can have sex with anyone, anytime, anywhere, in any combination, that this was a good thing. This is the ultimate example of emotional health, and that to disagree with that, you were repressed or you were somehow hung up.
Yeah, but Chuck, Freud backed down on that one. That was not the total story. He talked of polymorphous perversity, but that's where he kicked in with this so-called latency period. Not that I agree with the latency period, that's another long story, but where he said that there ought not to be sex. Children shouldn't be engaged in any kind of sexual activity until they reach a certain level of maturity. And when I was talking with Pat, I mentioned, there's another big problem with this bunk and I call it bunk, that we're being dealt with this chickie-do here, our Maria, who, by the way, is never mind, we won't go into Maria. But there's another point, and that is that we know, the brain science data now are across the board in agreement, that the kids are not really mature enough to make any kinds of sexual decisions at all like that until they reach 21, 25 years of age. The cognitive functions, the ability to make those kinds of very complex and life-changing decisions don't happen, should not happen until they're mature enough to make those decisions. So here we have this bunch of people here claiming to be the experts. They're holding themselves out as experts in this $100,000 website. They're holding themselves out as experts, and yet they're ignoring the very fact that the kids that they're talking to, all of them under 18, are in no position to make those kinds of decisions. They should not be making those decisions. And the idea that there's nothing left to these girls to defend themselves with, when I was a kid, you could say, no, I can't do that because my mommy and daddy will find out. Or, I can't do that because I'll get pregnant. I'll get an STD. There are excuses now to cover all that. And Big Pharma, let me tell you, is right there with all those excuses. And they're also there with the Viagra to give the kid, because the majority of our consumers of Viagra appear to be younger fellows, not the old guys.
Why would a young kid need Viagra?
Isn't that a good question?
Well, it certainly is a good question.
We have to go into that another time when we talk about pornography, and that is why they need Viagra. But anyway, we'll move away from that one for now, and we'll say that all of the shots that they're going to be given, all of the vaccines for the STDs, all of the help, after you get the STDs, all the coverage for that, all the abortion stuff, all that's making these guys rich, the big pharma rich. And they know that the human brain is not adequate to handle these kinds of stimuli and these kinds of data until they're mature enough to, quote unquote, vote. So give me a break. We've been conned here, people, but we've been conned now for the past 40 years, in my view, based on my extensive research. And somebody's got to start stepping up and taking the brunt of this and saying, no, you can't do this. Kids can't do this. Go back to why did we have the laws in place in the first place when Kinsey came on board? Why was rape? Half the states in the nation gave the death penalty for rape. The other half, they could, and the other half life. Why was seduction against the law? Why was alienation of affection against the law? These are all to protect young women, young girls who have a quick response mechanism when the guy says, oh, you're so pretty, you're so beautiful, I want you to be the mother of my child, but let's do it now because I can't wait, And I know the feminist movement has claimed that we're all these, you come a long way, baby, and all that sort of stuff, but girls will tend to do what the traffic demands. They want a nest, they want a boy to take them to the prom, and if that requires standing upside down, doing the gymnastics, having the sodomies, doing all that kind of garbage, most of them are going to tend to do it.
Okay, we're going to welcome aboard our affiliate stations. You're listening to Cyberstation Radio Network and WDIS AM 1170 in Norfolk, 1490 KT will be with us. Okay. 1490 WWPR in Bradenton, Florida, KRKQ FM in Ashland, Oregon. Dr. Judith Reisman, I want to thank you so much for joining us.
It was a delight. Thank you, gentlemen, for engaging me in such an exciting conversation.
You're entirely welcome. Sexual Sabotage available in all major bookstores.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Get it.